morning. Good. Yeah, my name is Talent. I'm going to be your facilitator for this firefighting training. So our training will be just focusing in acronyms. We'll be looking muchly on LCPPR, which means we'll look at legislation requirements in regards to fire. Then we'll look at classifications of fire. Then we'll look in terms of prevention. How do we prevent fire? Then we look at preparedness. How do we prepare for fire fighting? Then we look at respond. How do we respond? So that is our LC PPR. So it's just, I'll try to summarize the whole concept of firefighting before we start writing our assessment and everything. Okay. So, in terms of the legislation, we do have what we call the OHS Act 85 of 1993. This act has got 50 sections, but in a summary way, this act allows a 50-50 responsibility. It's a shared responsibility between the employer and the employee to make sure that we prevent accidents at companies, as well as to make sure that we assist each other in responding if there is any loophole that can lead to accident. So no one can say it's not my duty, because the OHS Act gives us a 50-50 responsibility to do that. So there are responsibility like employers' responsibility under Section 8. Then we do have employees' responsibility under Section 14. But if we look at both in responsibilities, they require us to identify hazards. If we identify them, we assess the risks associated with those hazards. If we find the risks, then we have to deal with control. So, which means everyone has to contribute in controlling of such risks. So, when it comes to fire, we do have fire regulations. Fire regulation is not difficult to interpret because its major mandatory is to address fire accidents within the company. So it looks at the requirements in terms of equipments that must be within the organization, in terms of the training requirements, in terms of other policies that assist us in preventing fire. So this regulation, fire regulation, stipulates that each and every company need to have appointed firefighters. These appointed firefighters has to be trained people who are trained on fighting fire, basic firefighters. So when they are appointed, these people, they will do what we call monthly inspections of the fire equipments within that organization, which means whoever who is responsible for safety will now have to create a checklist. So that checklist will have the list of the equipments and the things that must be checked on each and every equipment. So on a monthly basis, which means you guys after training as firefighters, you need to get checklist, understand your internal checklist, so that every month you have to inspect. Then the same regulation requires us to have at least portable fire extinguishers as one of the equipment that can be used to fight fire. These are portable equipments. They come in different categories, depends on which type and class of fire that we are fighting. But just to mention some few, we do have DCP, dry chemical powder. We do have those with which are CO2. We do have those which are foam. They have foam inside. We have water-based. So we have different types of those equipments or firefighting portable fire extinguishers. But these fire extinguishers, except the CO2 fire extinguisher, all of them they come with a pressure gauge, which means when you are inspecting on monthly basis, you'll be checking if the gauges are at green portion. But for the CO2, since it comes without a gauge, which means we have to put it on a scale because the CO2 has got the weight when it is filled, which means every month we check if the weight is still remain the same as stipulated by the technician. If it becomes much lower, it means that it's leaking. Then it has to be serviced by a technician. Because the pressure remain constant. In most cases, if we use CO2 now, after when it is empty, still the pressure is still high. Yes. So now if they put a gauge, you will find that still the gauge will be at green while it is empty. So that is why there is no gauge. All right. Then we check the overall condition of this cylinder. Our cylinder, we have to check for overall condition. If there is not defective, no damages, then we check the hose pipe, the pipe that is used to dispatch whatever agent that is in our fire extinguisher. Yeah, I will explain properly there when we get to the classification. So here I'm just giving you an orientation of legislation requirements now, your inspection in general. So your inspection just differs on CO2 because there's no gauge, but the rest that I'm stipulating, we find it on any other portable fire extinguisher. So the hose reel has to be inspected. The safety pin must be always be there and sealed. So there must be a seal, there must be a safety pin, and the blanch valve must also be fine, no loose connection, or it must have to show that it's working. Then we have to check also the service date because every 12 months, according to the regulation, a fire technician has to come. A fire technician is not an inspector. He doesn't come and inspect. He come and test to check if the pressure is still fine as recommendable because it depends with the size of the extinguisher. Each and every size of extinguisher has got recommendable pressure that is expected to come out of it because we might stay relaxed thinking that we have equipment. On the day when there is fire now, it is coming like a hose pipe, like water for watering vegetable, no pressure. So this has to be pressure. So that is why they normally come yearly to do pressure tests and make sure that all the seals are fine, replace all damaged things, and also to to sign it. So which means that is part of the inspection. Then these fire extinguishers must be easily accessible even with your shortest employee, which means as part of your inspection, you check if your portable fire extinguishers are mounted where they are easily accessible. You must not stretch to get the fire extinguisher. You must not bend to get the fire extinguisher. You must easily get it without endangering yourself. Then it must be mounted visibly on the wall. And where it is mounted, there must be a sign which shows that a fire extinguisher is here. The sign is not any sign, they must be SAPS approved. So they must be approved by South African Bureau of Standards because they have to be up to standard. So those signs must be there. Then, according to the regulation, it says from one fire extinguisher to another, the distance must not be more than 23 meters apart. So they said not more than, which means you can even space every 1 meter if you have capacity to do that, every 2 meter, 5 meter. But from one fire extinguisher to another, we must not walk for more than 23 meters apart. If we walk for more than 23 meters apart, it means we are not complying with the regulations requirements. So those are the things that have to be checked on a monthly basis. Then in terms of regulation requirements again, in terms of preparedness, they require evacuation procedures. So there must be an evacuation plane, which is mounted where your visitors report to your premises, which is mounted where your employees report to duty, so that people can easily see the axis that you have in such a building, in such an area, as well as also that evacuation plane contain all the areas where the fire alarms are. If you do have fire extinguishers, where they are, the hose reels, the fire hydrants, if you have. So a person can easily locate the direction based on the evacuation plane. So that evacuation plane must be displayed and also up to standard and also visible at all the times. Then, when the evacuation plan is there, it requires you to have evacuation policy and procedure. So, the evacuation policy and procedure is communicated with the employees. So, every employee, as they are inducted, then there will be what? Evacuation procedures also being part of the induction. That is how we can easily communicate the evacuation policy and procedure. Then to visitors as well as they are inducted, we also have to induct them on evacuation procedures to say, so we can, in most cases, we cannot test our alarms on daily basis, but we can create a video which capture our alarm what sound, isn't it? Then a visitor will watch and see, oh, if you hear this, this means it's a fire emergency. So if you have other drills that you do, then we can differentiate from fire alarm and otherwise robbery alarm or whatever that can be an emergency based on your risk assessment. So that has to be communicated properly. Then other documents that normally required is the smoking policy. We know that we are living in a world where some people they do smoke. So those who smoke, smoking is also one of the major what causes of fire. So there must be a policy and a procedure which controls how smoking can be carried out properly without endangering anyone's life. So the smoking policy will be accompanied with the what? A smoking area. So there must be a declared smoking area which is free from fire hazards. So any area to be declared as a smoking area, it means that area is free from fire hazards. We don't expect to see grass, dry grass nearby. We don't expect to see exposed cables nearby. We don't expect to see cars parked nearby. Anything, gassy tanks nearby. It must be a place which is isolated from fire hazards. Then, in most cases, we normally encourage that at least 6 meters away. That is if it is protected from wind. Because if there is wind now, it means that it can be part of your risk assessment now. Every person before he smokes, you have to check is it too windy? If it is too wind, then it means now there must be an increase of the area. Because remember, when it is too wind, there is a wind possibility of wind blown away the smoking ashes. Yes, then they can ignite whatever that is nearby. So that is why your smoking policy has to explain what must be assessed before smoking. So that if we get to a point and we see that they are hazard, which means no smoking can take at such place. Otherwise, you might have two areas which you declare as smoking areas. The one is near easily accessible, which means if there is no wind or whatever, people can easily use that. But in a manner when there is wind, otherwise there is another one which has got a bit of a shade like where they can sit and smoke. So as long as it addresses possibility of hazards which can contribute to fire, they need to be declared safe. So that has to be done. So smoking policy accompanied by our smoking area. Then when that is done, the same legislation requires each and every company, if you do have any chemicals within your premises, you create what we call HASCOM. I think you are aware of HASCOM, that is your HASCOM communication program. So HASCOM communication program, because the way in which we address control measures of fire risks with the chemicals differs from one chemical to another. But you do have your SDS within the company safety data sheet, which address, there is a section, I'm not so sure it can be section 3 or section 4. It addresses actually the what? Firefighting prevention when dealing with such chemical. So when it comes to how far as well, that question also on the SDS is there to say no, this chemical must be stored otherwise 10 meters away from any fire risks or hot surfaces or whatever, because it is specifically after they have tested to check its flammability or explosivity. So that is how we have to make sure that we have a HASCOM program. So HASCOM program in most cases is made up of our global harmonized system in terms of classification of chemical risks by color coding. I think you know they classified them in 4 groups. If we see that is red, we know that it's flammable. If we see it's blue, we know that it has health effects. If we see that is yellow or orange, it has a reactivity at certain otherwise temperature or whatever. If it is white, we know that it has a special instruction. Otherwise, do not mix with water. Do not do this. Do not do this. So that is the global harmonized system which classify it. So it has to be contained as part of our our HASCOM program. Then we also look at the classification. Here in South Africa, we do have 9 classes. So the 9 classes of these dangerous goods in terms of the numbers. Class one, we know the risks of class one. That class one is explosives, isn't it? Then in class two, class three, up until we get to the class nine. So we check based on such risks as well. It's part of our HASCOM program. So that is if we do have any chemicals within our organization. So that is the legislation requirements. So legislation now, in order for the proper implementation of such, they require that all emergency exits must not be staked with any objects. They must be easily accessible. Then now there must be people who are appointed by the employer to assist in the evacuation procedures. So a company can choose to say, okay, firefighters can also assist in evacuation. That is, if you have quite a number of them, or you have separate evacuation coordinators, which means if you have evacuation coordinators or whoever that coordinate evacuation, those people have access to their nearest firefighting station number. So we don't expect people who are trained to call the national number 112. 112 is for who? For those who are not trained. Because you guys, you are trained. We encourage that the coordinators have to visit your nearest local station and get their direct number. Then that number has to be displayed on the wall. Then the numbers of the firefighters. But now, due to POPIA Act as well, we expect that before such is done, in terms, but not the emergency numbers, we don't need any authorization to use them because they are public numbers. But when it comes to the internal team now, they have to be displayed. In most cases, according to the requirements of the OSHA Act, it requires that for easy identification, let them have their photo for identification and their number. So a person can know that, oh, this is our firefighter, this is their number. Then there must be a disclaimer where those numbers can only be strictly be used for emergency sake, because we might, yes, internal staff. Then they will be displayed other ways at your close to your evacuation plane. Then people will know. Like for example, let's say for example we are in this class, something happened. I don't know who is the first aider, who is whatever. But if it happens that all of you now you are in a problem, I can easily quickly rush to your evacuation plane, and I see next to it there are some posters which shows me who is who. Then I can quickly call those people while I'm busy also calling the professionals, so that at least everyone will be safe. So it's a requirement of the legislation. So legislation also requires each and every company to have a risk assessment. So in this regard, we are just looking at the fire risk assessment, because this is what we are doing. Although risk assessment is broad, but it is specifically for fire. So for fire, they normally address muchly on the sources of fire. So sources of fire, the major source of all the causes of fire is electricity. So all electrical equipment, there must be an internal procedure which addresses how do you inspect your electrical equipment to check if your equipment meet the requirements and the standard. Because I might come with my laptop, or other ways it has exposed wires, then I won't tell you. Are you getting it? As soon as I plug it, explode. Now it means I brought in a hazard. So there must be a procedure. How do you check if all electrical gadgets are fine, your heaters? There must be a scheduled time where you check your bulbs, like the one which is not working. What is the cause? It might otherwise power is getting there, but it's not what one day it explode and cause fire. So all the plugs have to be inspected, printers, whatever that we use, which is electrical. Then the transport department, they also check for leaks, because leaks, we know that whenever it comes to vehicles, if we have petrol leaks, diesel leaks, they are highly flammable fluids, which can cause fire as well. So that there must be scheduled inspections within the organization. But mostly it is recommendable that it has to be done quarterly, at least quarterly by any qualified person. Then monthly, internally. So you might just appoint 2, 3 people. You are electrical portable electrical equipment inspector. This one is a what is an internal. That also fulfill your audits when they are looking at fire regulation, that yes, definitely you are doing inspections, you are doing regular inspections. So it shows that your company is safe, more safer than ever. So that is the regulations requirement. So internally you create such inspections, periodic inspections, then have to be carried out. Then pre-use inspections. Okay, no problem.